Story about this ghost tanker full of Venezuelan oil that the military is trying to board. Here's the latest on that from Fox News. U.S. forces are attempting to board the Russian flag Mariner's oil tanker in the North Atlantic. The news, first reported by Reuters, comes after the Wall Street Journal reported on Tuesday that Russia had sent a submarine and other naval assets to escort the tanker. The vessel, previously operating under the name Bella 1, has spent more than 2 weeks attempting to slip past U.S. enforcement efforts targeting sanctioned oil shipments near Venezuela, the Outlook reported. U.S. Southern Command, which oversees U.S. military activities in Latin America and the Caribbean, said on Fox and then posted on X that it remains ready to support our U.S. government agency partners in standing against sanctioned vehicles and vessels and actors transiting through the region. Our sea services are vigilant, agile, and posted to track vessels of interest. When the call comes, we'll be there, the Post read. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said in December that the U.S. Coast Guard, with support from the Department of War, seized a second oil tanker off of the Venezuelan coast. The United States will continue to pursue the illicit movement of sanctioned oil that is used to fund narco-terrorism in the region, said Noem. We will find you and we will stop you. And the president has been adamant about this. Now, Kristi Noem speaking very bluntly about it as well. And it looks like we're going to have another oil tanker added to the United States fleet of tankers here in the very near future. What's kind of interesting about this is that you hear a story like came out late yesterday when the president said they had come to an agreement on oil with Venezuela that somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million to 60 million barrels of oil would be given to the United States as paying for, some back charges that Venezuela hasn't spent their money on. And people go, wow, 60 million barrels of oil. Do you know how long that lasts here in the United States? Try about 2.5 days. Usually a little less than that. We use well over 100,000 barrels of oil a day here in the U.S. So, this is a drop in the bucket. It's not like we're taking over the entire Venezuela oil industry. That is not the case. So, I heard within one of the reports that we did on our news at the top of the hour that it looks like there's going to be a big powwow on Friday amongst the big major oil, producers in that area of the country, in the area of Venezuela, to talk about Venezuela, because oil companies are owed billions of dollars from Venezuela. Venezuela hasn't been paying their bills. And, Maduro's been living high off the hog. So it's important that, we take care of that type of thing and make sure that, the spirit and the law itself is being upheld in that sector of the world. You want to make sure that that's done. If not, why have laws, right? I mean, seriously, why even have laws if you're not supporting the laws that you've already passed? You need to do that. All right, other news that's going on, and that's what most of the rest of this show will be today, taking a deeper look on what's going on around the world, where the pain of the economic crisis has been most deeply felt in not in Venezuela, but Iran. The Financial Times reports, with living standards in the Islamic Republic falling to historic lows in recent months, this sense of desperation has burst onto the streets, spiraling into the biggest round of protests in Iran in several years. But while most large protest movements over the past 2 decades have been built around the pro-democracy demands of the urban middle class, the epicenter this time has shifted to the poor neighborhoods and provincial cities and towns where Iran's economic pain is most acute. And if you heard our interview with Congressman Hill in the first half hour of the show, he warned everybody, don't read this that Iran's government is is teetering on the brink, because typically Iran shows up with the military out in the streets and kills several hundred people and squashes and puts the people who are trying to oust the Khomeini back in, quote, to their place, as Khomeini sees it. So it's something to think about as far as that. Now, desperate measures from the mullahs as they've been facing these protests, and the protests have been bigger than the past, and they've been sparked by a deepening economic crisis. There's very little water now in Iran. There's spigots are dry in Tehran, basically. The government announced plans Monday to provide most citizens with a monthly payment equivalent to around $7. That, according to the New York Times, that tells you how much people make just normally. That $7 a month would be a big deal, but it is. So far, the president of Iran says that he's trying to reform the government and has moved to overhaul its subsidy system, replacing a long-standing policy of providing cheap foreign currency to importers, widely blamed for corruption and distorting markets, with direct household support. Under the new plan, which expands an existing scheme, all 88 million people in the country will begin receiving food vouchers over the next several weeks. In Loristan, the measures seem too little too late. For Leah, the assistance feels painfully inadequate. Her family will be entitled to 30 million rials a month in food vouchers. That's little more than enough to buy rice, she said. And that tells you how high their inflation is. It kind of sounds like the Weimar Republic before World War II in Germany. The inflation was so bad in Germany at that time, people would go to the store with wheelbarrows full of money, and by the time they got to the store, the money they had in the wheelbarrows wasn't worth anything. And they couldn't even buy food. So I guess that's kind of the way it is there in Iran. She said, "This is nothing. What about the rest of our needs? What about my mother's medication?" She said. "I told my mom she can cry day and night. We are no longer simply poor. We are far below the level of poverty we have always lived under." So as things get worse, expect that things will get hotter in the streets of Iran. It's going to be interesting to see if they can keep themselves so-called, as I would say, in business. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it or not, or whether the Shahs, or not the Shah, but the Ayatollah is going to book it out of the country. All right, East End Towing wants you to know they're ready to help you out. There's nothing worse, I think, on a day that maybe it's chilly outside and it's raining, and you have your car break down. Maybe it's a flat tire, maybe something in the engine went bad and the car won't run anymore. But you need to get off the side of the road. You need to be taken to a place where your car can be fixed so that you can get on with your life. I mean, trying to get on with your life and not having a car at your disposal is very, very difficult in America today. For most of us who live outside of Little Rock, we travel, anywhere between 10 and 40 miles to transit into work, commute into work each day, and without a car, that's just ridiculous. It doesn't work very well at all. Well, Arkansas East End Towing belongs to the Towing Recovery Board. They're licensed, they're insured, every truck is permitted. They know all the ins and outs of towing in the state, and all you have to do is call 501-888-8849. They'll come and get you, hook you up, take you to where you want your car to go. That's 501-888-8849. Anything, anytime, anywhere, East End Towing. Let's look at what's going on with Venezuela and how it's affecting other people. It's clear already that Russia, China, and Iran have all lost a key ally and partner in our hemisphere. But the top loser may be Cuba. The Wall Street Journal reports that the capture of Venezuelan strongman Nicolas Maduro, one of the Cuban intelligence service's most valuable charges, punctured its aura of invincibility. U.S. elite forces, as you know, descended on Maduro's compound at about 2 o'clock in the morning local time Saturday, grabbing him and his wife before they could escape to a safe room. That, according to General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Cuban government said 32 officers from its Revolutionary Armed Forces and the Interior Ministry, which runs intelligence services, were killed in the line of duty as part of Maduro's security detail. It's a defeat for Cuba and denotes its weakening, highlighting vulnerabilities in its security procedures, said Maria Werlau, author of a 2019 book. We had her on Cuba's intervention in Venezuela. Ed Morrissey writing on Hot Air, no kidding, Cuba's forces lost nearly 36 elite security forces without inflicting a single casualty while defending a fortress. That either demonstrates the nearly superhuman capability in American forces or complete incompetence within Cuba's armed forces. And it's probably a percentage of both. I would say the incompetence side was on the high side. The oil out of Venezuela keeps Cuba's communist regime in business. As Donald Trump ramped up the pressure on Maduro, Havana had to have fortified its security preparations around its most important financial provider. And they not only failed in the mission, but apparently couldn't even inflict a single casualty as the Americans plucked the Maduros out of the center of their defensive position. That is an impressive level of failure. I mean, let's face this. The Cubans aren't the best military in the world. We've known that since Grenada. We've known that. I mean, when we went in there into Grenada back in the 80s, the Cubans were no match for the American military now, and we've become nothing more than stronger and more lethal since that time. So kind of interesting as you look at what's going on there, that the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, Hamas, they're all going to be asked and shown the door and told to get out of Venezuela, that they're not wanted in this hemisphere, and they need to leave this hemisphere. Well, let's turn to something that's going on here in our country, and that's up in New York City. Madani is putting his soft hug of collectivism into action. Mayor Madani has appointed Kay Weaver, his former tenant advocate, heading up the revitalized mayor's office to protect tenants. She's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. What a big surprise. I would not have guessed that she was part of the Democratic Socialists of America, and a genuine Marxist radical. She pushes against private property rights and towards a model of shared equity. What handed her on the radar screen of Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General serving in the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, is Weaver's explicitly racist housing policy ideas that she has. According to Matthew Smits, in 2016, Madani's Director of Appointments wrote, "It's important that white people feel defeated." Now, I'm not making this up, all right? This is in black and white already. These are papers that were put out. In 2018, his housing advisor wrote, quote, "Impoverish the white middle class," unquote. Madani's own platform called for raising taxes on richer and whiter neighborhoods. Harmeet Dillon said, "Just because you're white doesn't mean you have fewer rights in this country. We all have equal rights in our country, and we will not stand for New York City violating any federal law whatsoever. They should be on notice on this. They are on high security, and we will swoop right in and do what's necessary to protect all citizens and taxpayers and residents of New York where they are legally living." So that's something to keep in mind. Let's see if Madani not only walks the walk, but he gets out there and feels like he can push back against the federal government, because he will lose in things that he wants to do. What he wants to do is illegal. So it will be fun to see him be told you can't do this or that. The DOJ now has made it known that Tim Walz is under a microscope as far as they're concerned. And it's only rightly so. I mean, all of this, waste and graft and everything that's going on in Minnesota right now, for the governor to say, "Well, I didn't know anything like that was going on," it kind of rings hollow to me. I mean, if he doesn't know a lot of this stuff is going on, who does? He may have decided not to run again, but he may have just begun his efforts to defend his negligence and culpability. Joseph Calfont of Town Hall wrote, "The probe will examine," and that starts today, "the probe will examine whether or not Walz was complicit in or criminally liable for the ongoing $9 billion fraud scandal, primarily involving Somali immigrants in Minnesota during his tenure as governor. Quote, it's a top priority for President Trump, and he believes that Governor Walz is criminally liable, and I think that the Department of Justice is going to find out. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said in an interview, and Matt Margolis of PJ Media picked up with a quote from Attorney General Pam Bondi. She's quoted as saying, "You saw today the Department of Homeland Security announced we have nearly 2,000 agents from the Homeland Security Investigations Team. The FBI is on the ground and we're freezing money." We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But we got to get ready for the news, which is coming up here in about 20 seconds. So I won't go any deeper into the story until we get the news done and get back from that. But that Minnesota story is a huge story of fraud, waste, and abuse. And it's going on in other places in the United States. Mississippi has got a story about it of going on down there, and in Ohio as well. Back with you here on the Dave Elswick Show. And let's get back to getting the rest of that story that I was talking about before we went to break. And I got to get over to it here. I was looking at something else. I have to admit to you that I was doing that. Let's see. All right. Here we go. Okay, Matt Margolis of PJ Media picked up a quote from Attorney General Pam Bondi, and she said, "You saw today the Department of Homeland Security announced that we have nearly 2,000 agents from the Homeland Security Investigations Team. The FBI is on the ground," that's just talking about now, in Minnesota, "and we're freezing money." She added that the Health and Human Service Department has already taken concrete steps, including cutting funding to potentially fraudulent daycare centers, and she made clear that the investigation could reach to the very top of Minnesota's government. Quote, "Rest assured, it's a top priority for the president, and he believes that Governor Walz is criminally liable," said Bondi. "I think the Department of Justice is going to find out." So there was a lot more behind Walz suddenly saying that he was not going to run for re-election and that he was getting out of the race for governor again, because it sounds like to me that the bullseye is moving over him, probably over Ellison, the AG, and some others there in the Minnesota government. And this is not just a Minnesota problem. Now, this was a big problem, don't get me wrong. Not trying to, in any way, shape, or form, make this sound like it wasn't a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a $9 billion big deal. Evidently, and we need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to know who is responsible. And I'm going to tell you right now that I don't think you spend all of your investigation looking at people who took money. The little people in the scam that went in and said, "Yeah, I've got a daycare center," and was doing that. I think we want to make sure that they look hard and long at the politicals that are at the top of the heap in that state, and that some people that are up in the upper echelons, maybe the AG, maybe the governor himself, need to be cooling their heels in federal penitentiary by the time this all is taken care of. Now, how long will it take? Well, you've watched this stuff go on in Washington, D.C., and, they'll delay and delay and delay and delay and delay and try to make it so that people forget about what the charges were all about in the first place. That's typically the way that they play the game, and we got to make sure that that doesn't happen. That people are going to need to be held liable and need to be held responsible for this crazy stuff that's been going on. Just like Ted DiBiase's son down in Mississippi, they're going after him for $77 million. And it's fraud, waste, and abuse. You know, we've known for a long time, you and I both have known for a long time that a lot of money was flowing from the government to agencies in other states and to people in other states, and it was fraudulent. And people were walking away with big money for themselves and for their folks that were helping them run this. From what I understand, after reading about Mississippi, that if you wanted to get put together a group that was a nonprofit group, that all you had to do was to fill out a form and turn it in, and literally nobody was checking up on it. Nobody. They get the form, okay, stamp it, move it on, and you were able to get this money that was there for people on dole. And we're not talking about individuals here. We're talking about organizations. We're talking about multiple $1 million. We're talking about Ted DiBiase Jr., $77 million that he was taking the American taxpayer for. So when we've said fraud, waste, and abuse, and we talk about it, we're talking big bucks. In Minnesota, we're talking $9 billion. In Mississippi right now, we're talking $77 million. Now, that money doesn't belong to the people who are stealing it from the government. That money belongs to you and me. This is like somebody picking your pocket, getting your wallet and pulling out all the money in your wallet and throwing your wallet on the ground or whatever, and they see you're a good mark, and so they come back and hit you every couple of weeks to get the money out of your wallet. They are stealing directly from you. And this will not stop until a lot of people end up in jail. And you've got to get upset about it. I have to stay upset about it. Everybody needs to be upset about this and calling for responsibility to be had in these different fraud, waste, and abuses that are going on. And I understand they're looking at some other states now as well. In Ohio, they're looking in other states across the West. And they're not just blue states. There's red states as well. You know, when you feel like you got an easy access to free money, it don't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever. That money is green, and it entices everyone, and everyone that is without any ethics, without any belief in the law, goes in and raids those programs. That's why I don't like government programs. I tell you, if they were able to go in and come up with one of these Doge agencies, put it together, and just let them go and check out how much fraud, waste, and abuse there was in the EBT, SNAP program, we would all be stunned by the millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that are being stolen by people here in our own country. So it's something that, this is why you got to be, careful of just sending out big money to states. I mean, it's not their money. It's not. It's nobody's money except your money. It's been put in a big pile, and people are going by, and with a tiny bit of oversight of this money, are going through and taking money and putting it in their own bank accounts. I mean, I guess one of the biggest deals going on right now in Minnesota is getting yourself a daycare license so that you can make, hundreds of thousands of dollars off the American taxpayer. So that's a story that's not going to go away, and I think it's going to get uglier before it gets clarified for all of us about how bad it really is. And this stuff has been going on for years, and you always hear them talk about fraud, waste, and abuse and stuff, but you don't see a concerted effort to stop it. Perhaps Trump is going to be the president who does that, and let's keep our fingers crossed that happens. I mean, because if we get some of that money back, maybe they can lower the tax rate in the United States a little bit better. Maybe we can get to the point that the president has been talking about, where there is no income tax in America any longer, because we're keeping all the money that has been spent, and it's done in a lawful way. So what's going on with this whole thing about Trump and Greenland? I mean, is it a real story, or is it a faux story, a fake story? Well, we'll figure it out when we come back. We'll talk about it here on the Dave Elswick Show. And let me just put it this way. Denmark is not happy about what the president is trying to do. And let's find out exactly what he's thinking when we return here on the Dave Elswick Show on 101.1 FM, The Answer. Look, earlier this year, a story came out. In fact, it was last year. Trump came out and started talking about Greenland and talking about how, we could use our military to take it over or whatever. And, he was just shooting from the hip. But he came back out yesterday and talked a little bit more about Greenland. But he downplayed and didn't talk about military action because it got too many people, upset. Wall Street Journal reporting today that Secretary of State Rubio had a meeting with the GOP lawmakers yesterday and said the goal is to buy the island from Denmark. That, according to people familiar with the discussions, Rubio's statements, which were made Monday during a closed briefing, come as the White House has been offering increasingly belligerent statements about controlling the island. President Trump and senior administration officials have publicly declined to rule out seizing the territory by force. Here's what they'll say, all right, and the media makes more of it than what it is. And they'll say, well, we could do it this way, or we could do it that way, or maybe this way over here, and military force is on the table. It's always on the table. Military force is always on the table. Everybody's got to understand that. When you're talking about international politics and things of that nature, the United States military is always on the table if it's something that's serious and that might be called upon to be used. It's always there. Is it the possibility of using it? Is it high or it's low? Typically, I would say it's low. Just because it's sitting there on the table, that you got it sitting there. It's like if let's say you're doing some contractual things with other people, and maybe they're not the most savory people. You know, they're not savory. They're not people that you trust. And so you've got a 357 Magnum. And so you take that Magnum out of your holster and you set it on the table. Okay, you're using it as probably not that big a deal. You're not going to do it. It's just there to let the other side know, I got that if I got to use it. If I ever have to use it, I have it. That's the reason, hey, look, I've got guns in my car. You know, I've got it just in case. I don't think I'm going to have to use it. I'm not getting in the car, starting it up, and heading off to Little Rock to go to work thinking, well, I wonder how many people I'm going to have to shoot today to get to work. That's not what I'm thinking. It's there just in case. It's to live by the Dave Elswick adage. Better, to be tried by 12 than carried by 6. I mean, that's the way I look at it. That's why I carry a weapon with me in my car, and it's readily available to me and close to me in my when I'm in the driver's seat. Well, that's what you do when you're talking to people about some of the stuff that they talk about when they're dealing with international issues. You've got all these things. We got money. We got, hey, we'll build your infrastructure. We'll do this. We'll do that. And, oh, by the way, if you get ugly with us, then you put the tanks and you put the planes and you put everything else, the soldiers and all that on the table, and you push that out a little bit. We've got this, too, if it would ever become necessary. That's what they're doing. And the media picks up on it. Well, he's threatening them with military force. No, he's just saying, hey, if push comes to shove, you may not want to go to push comes to shove. Let's just keep that in mind. Anyway, they had this closed-door meeting yesterday, and they talked to the GOP, and they were talking to them, and they've been offering, the White House has, increasingly some statements about controlling Greenland. President Trump and senior administration officials have publicly declined to rule out seizing the territory by force. Is that a possibility? Yeah, but very, very, little of a chance. We're talking Denmark here. It's a democracy. We're not going to go in and treat them bad. Let's just say Greenland and Denmark are not too warm to this idea. In the magazine The Economist, Greenland and Denmark and much of Europe are in shock. Oh, they're in shock. They're in shock because they thought America was on the ropes and, we owe so much money and we can't do this, we can't do that. And suddenly we say, well, we'll just buy Greenland. Here's what we're suggesting. I mean, think about it. Buying Greenland is like, you buy a Coke and you got a big ice cube in it, and you're asking how much is the ice cube? I mean, it's green. Have you ever been to Greenland? Yeah. Good. Talk on the microphone to me. What were you saying now?
I haven't ever been there, but I have seen it.
Okay. I did some TDYs when I was in the military, and the one that I didn't like the most was when I went to Thule, and that's in Greenland. Most of that Air Force Base is underground because you don't want to be on top of the ground in Greenland. It's too frickin' cold. The wind's blowing and everything else. So, you go between parts of the base and stuff underground in tunnels. And it's not, I don't see, us buying that island and then watching Hilton build a big motel on it. I don't see that happen. I don't think there's a lot of ladies that want to, put on coconut oil and lie out in the cold, try to catch some.
Because I don't know why they gave it the name Greenland.
Well, that was the Vikings. They called Iceland, and made everybody think that the whole, the whole country was a big piece of ice, which it wasn't. And then they called the other part, they called Greenland, in trying to think it's a great place to go. And so people would go there instead of Iceland. But to be honest, at one time, evidently, Greenland was much more temperate than it is now. The Vikings used to grow crops and all kinds of stuff in Greenland. Well, a year ago, Mr. Trump's threats against the self-governing Arctic territory of 56,000 people, which is part of Denmark, elicited mostly derision and distaste among European leaders. This time it's different, though. Enough is enough, responded Nielsen of Greenland's prime minister. No more pressure, no more innuendo, no more fantasies about annexation. Mette Frederiksen, Denmark's prime minister, implored Mr. Trump to drop the threats, adding that they should be taken seriously. European countries quickly closed ranks. All Nordic and Baltic leaders reaffirmed their support for Greenland and Danish sovereignty, as did Britain and France. Behind the show of unity, though, there was a sense of panic. Stephen Miller said that the United States is the power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO, and NATO interests, obviously, Greenland should be part of the United States. And so there's a conversation that we're going to have as a country. And that is, should we make Greenland the 51st state of the Union or whatever? That's going to be something to talk about. And I can understand the security aspect of that argument. I know a lot of people can't, and a lot of people, look, for the Democrats, for most of them, it doesn't matter what Trump is thinking about doing, what he is doing, they hate it. They just hate it. So don't expect the Democrats to get behind anything that Trump is suggesting. So, but it's something that is being thought about on under a real security concept. And we'll hear more about this, I think, as this year goes on. But good possibility. Maybe it becomes like like Guam. Guam's not a state. It's like a territory. But America's Day starts in over there in Guam, because it's on the other side of the date line. So the sun, when it rises in Guam, that's the first place that's American territory that the sun comes up on. How do I know that? Well, I was stationed there for 4 years, so I know a lot about Guam. All right, I know it's not going to tip over if they put more troops on it, and I know how important it is as a deep water port. All right, let's take a break, then we'll come back and we'll talk further here on the Dave Elswick Show. There's other stories that are going on. See if there's any new news about what's going on with that oil tanker that the Russians are puttering around out in the Atlantic. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Dave Elswick Show.